So next up is our good friend Arjen de Ruiter. And he's going to talk about how to scale efficiently and still stay fast. But of course, we have to see and pray to the laptop gods to make a presentation work.
It will work. In the meantime,
did you try turning it off and on again?
Um, that's a good tip. Maybe we should ask an IT guy. Oh.
Is there an IT guy in the room? No, no one.
I actually selected the wrong option, but I can do it like this. Here we go.
Here we
All
go.
right.
All right, give him a round of applause, Arjen. Good luck. Have fun.
E-commerce, and e-commerce is having a pretty tough time. So like results, plans in January this year versus achievements so far, not so good. How are your results doing so far? Like, who is kind of below budget compared to what you expected this year? Is everybody doing good? Yeah, some honest people indeed. No, meh. Yeah, so when I, like what you said, it's about scaling. When I submitted the talk, I thought, let's talk about scaling up. But then I more and more realized, like, okay, who's actually still scaling up? Because the venture capital is drying up and the revenue is not going that fast anymore. But still, I found it a useful talk because I do think that if you understand the principles behind scaling, you also understand how to be more efficient or even how to smartly scale down. What's happening? Oh yeah, that was intended.
I will go sit down now.
No, this was not intended. This was not so much. Oh, there we are.
See, there we go.
But I think this device thingy doesn't work. Yeah, you see? I don't know what it is, but...
Try this one?
Try this one? You're killing me, man. Just the wrong... Somebody left another device here. Somebody tried to trick me. It's yours or what? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so flat is a new up, basically. So, yeah, but then still principles behind scaling, still very relevant to make the right decisions if you scale down. So, if you ask me, still a useful talk. Who went by public transport today? Yeah, good. Who passed the central station in Eindhoven? Also a few. Yeah, so if you, but then you went by bus probably? Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, if you would have exited on the other side, there's a very nice coffee shop there. So not coffee shop as in blowing, but as in actually coffee. Yeah. So, and I think it's about 6 years ago or something that I had an appointment with a founder of a SaaS company in Eindhoven. And he responded to a post of mine on LinkedIn. And he said, yeah, we've got that problem. Can you talk to me? So I said, okay. If you give good coffee, I always talk to you. So what he then started talking about is, you know, we had 5 people. Now we have 10 people, but we're not twice as fast. What can we do to make these tech people work harder, better, so that we are twice as fast? And so what I said to him, I can help you, but what I was thinking is that, yeah, dude, you are probably the problem and not the engineers. But, so, and that happened actually quite a few times for other companies that that I talked to or reached out to me for some help, and what they're actually saying is, or what they actually expect, is they expect that it works like this, that if we add 5 people to a team of 5, that we double the output. And later, so I joined them on temp basis, then later I returned after like half a year or something for another assignment. It was the same topic, like, yeah, now we are with 10, we were with 10, we went to 20, it's still not twice as much. And that's because people expect this. But this is what really happens if you don't take action. And that's the difference between what sometimes stakeholders or managers expect and what we as engineers actually know. And interesting thing is that in this case, that founder of the company wants to stay close to the black line, but of course we also want to stay close to the black line. Imagine if you're hired somewhere here on this part, it wouldn't make you happy, right? Actually, if you're hired on the right side of the chart, you wish they had a backstage of Spotify, because it would have helped you to onboard faster, and tools like that actually help you get closer to the black line. What causes this? Anyone? What causes that companies are often on the orange line instead of the black one? Training, coordination, communication. Sorry? Processes, yeah. Yeah. Also this morning mentioned by, I think it was Philly in the talk about Spotify model, is one word, dependencies. And that is like communication, but also knowledge transfer, of which you could solutions like Backstage, for example, or in general, it's what I often refer to as dependencies. And the more, whether it's dependencies in code or in teams, one person knowing all, being in that other team, and we cannot make decisions, so we need to go to the other team. It slows us down, but it slows the other team down as well. Or me making a code change in a piece of code that is also deployed by other teams and owned by other teams. Or maybe the platform, if I can build, deploy, and run myself in a self-service mode, would help you stay closer to the black line compared to if I need to create a ticket and get something in return from a platform person. So this is what people expect, but it's how it's actually working. And what I've done is I've developed some visuals that I use with customers that I talk to and engineers to actually create a common language, because for what people often discuss is that often from engineering side people start to talk in terms of buzzwords. Excuse me if you're offended, but it just happens a lot. So we throw terms like DevOps, SRE, microservices, cloud computing, but they are a means to something, and they help you achieve something that actually the people on the left also want to achieve. So there's no like contradiction or something in what we want to achieve. It's just that people tend to move to practices really fast. And then the practices become a goal in itself, and you start to have a disconnect between stakeholders and managers. Or tools instead of practices. So I personally, for example, don't really have a problem with SAFe. Sorry if you have, but I'd more have a problem if SAFe is the goal in itself. And that's actually what often happens. That is, for example, pushed down from the top. But same with architectural patterns. If you do microservices, no issue with that, but it's not a goal in itself. What do you want to solve with it? And when is it micro enough? If I have 4 teams that I want to make independent, do I need 30 services? I don't know. Could be. So that's what I've developed, and the visuals that I've used in this talk, that I use them to align between different people in the organizations, and only then we step into practices and tools, so that we make sure we choose the practices and tools that really solve our problem, which is getting closer to that black line. For the principles I use, so talking principles first before we dive into tools and practices. For the principles I use, I have 3 examples. The first one is this: I drive in a Toyota IQ. I'm not obviously a big car fan, otherwise you wouldn't do that. I went to the Toyota dealership and I asked for the cheapest and the smallest one, And that was the IQ. Well, good deal. It's 10 years old. It's 100K by now. I drive it quite a lot. And it has some damage. Not my fault. So estimation, what would it cost? Toyota IQ, it's a two-seater, 100K, a little bit of damage. Estimate. How much cost? 20 bucks. 7,000? 8? 4? 5? Okay. Yeah, I paid 6 for it. They should have had you as a customer. You paid more for it. So in general, except for so you have if you remove the outliers, the 20 bucks and the above 8, then people get close to the 4 or 5 range. And that's, I think I would pay 3, 4, 5 for it now. So if it's like small, it's easy to estimate. If I would now ask you all to go outside to the parking lot over there and estimate all the cars in the same time, so in 1 minute, you wouldn't be able to do that because, yeah, a few are far away, I can't see them, there's different sizes, different ages and so forth. So you would probably have like millions differences. So first principle, small over large. Other one, who has solar panels? Yeah, so I think it's 1/4 who has solar panels. Yeah, so imagine that the people with solar panels also have a battery at home, which is currently not the case in the Netherlands really. The energy company is your battery, but let's say you have a battery. Then the other 75% are dependent on the big power plant. So if that one goes down, you're all impacted. Huge fault domain. If I would have local power supply with a battery, I would not be impacted. So the second principle here is autonomy over dependency. So if you do things more autonomous, it helps you to scale better. Third one and last one, people complain about traffic jams in the Netherlands. Actually, if you Google 405 California, then you're pretty happy with your traffic jam in the Netherlands. This is really like permanent, terrible stuff. What I try to visualize is that the more you can do in parallel, the faster things go. And also, in this case, in like freeways, the more lanes you have, the faster things flow. Yesterday I drove to Rotterdam on the A15, and that has 2 lanes, pretty bad, get stuck pretty quickly. Same time A2 was pretty good still. But also what you see here again is small over large, because in the A15 to Rotterdam, a lot of trucks and large work packages tend to slow things down really well. It's not flexible. And maybe also large teams or large deployable units compared to things small. But the essence here is parallel over in sequence. So then there's 3 principles that you can apply: small over large, parallel over in sequence, and autonomous over dependent. And these principles I try to apply to several important things like your team structure, your architecture, your way of working, and your technical platform. And then you can think about how do we make smaller teams that are not small, too small, so that you become again highly dependent on others, also not too big so that you get too many communication lines. But also in terms of architecture, how do you make smaller components so that these smaller teams can work in parallel? And a platform, how do you make a platform where autonomous teams can build independent service on a self-service platform that scales? If you apply these principles to these 4 domains, you can actually start choosing your practices. So that's where you start to choose your practices. And only then think about, hey, what tools and practices shall we use? So don't do DevOps or SRE or move to the cloud or do Scrum or Safe or whatever just because everybody else does it. Sometimes that's a nice reason. Maybe if everybody does it, you start thinking, well, should I not do it? But in the end, they're just practices and practices and tools come and go. But principles stay. And the nice thing is that today, for example, Backstage is maybe a platform solution that helps teams to become more independent and faster. But a new version may help even more, and in 5 years' time there will be something else that helps even more. But the principles stay. And that's a nice way to discuss with product owners, stakeholders, managers, like what do we put on the backlog, so that on one hand we deliver features, on the other hand we focus on improvements in team structure, processes, architecture and so forth, so that we stay close to the black line instead of just pushing for features. So this is what I do with companies, and then I fill in the practices in the cells, and only then we start executing on these practices in a certain order of priority. But this is output. This is just output. So now I move from the orange line maybe closer to the black line. Everybody happy? Actually not everybody happy, because the guy at the coffee shop still thinks that he doesn't get what he wants. And that's because there's something that's more important than output. And what's that? Customer. Happiness, expectation. Money, yes, money. So outcome, yeah. So which is in commercial organizations translated to money. Yeah, there's also companies organizations who are not about the money, but most probably are. Yeah. So and then for that I use another definition of productivity, so not so much output. How would you measure output, by the way, before we get into that? So how would you measure that we stay closer to the black line? That's the good answer, because I wouldn't do it. I would not measure output, because if you measure output, like, yeah, it always has side effects. And I think that's also a reason why what Susanne said in Spotify, you don't measure like how does actually such a tool help you be more productive, but there's other measures that make it very likely that you become more productive, like developer happiness. And if you want to measure something related to output, you could also use the 4 metrics from, as written in the book, Accelerate. So the speed metrics like time to market and deployment frequency, or the stability metrics like change fail rate and time to resolve. But they're not a goal in itself. So I can deploy very frequent, but it doesn't mean that I get good results. But on the other hand, highly successful companies are in general doing pretty well on these 4 metrics. That's basically what the book states. So if there's something in output you want to measure, then I would go for that, or developer happiness. What you can measure is outcome, because that's often sales, the money. And there's one book and one author that has a nice definition of productivity that I like, and that's from the book The Goal by Goldratt. And quite some people probably heard about it or read some blogs on it. Does anybody know how Goldratt defines productivity? I heard throughput. Who said throughput? Oh, yes, throughput, yeah. So productivity, according to Goldratt, is throughput divided by your cost to get to that throughput. And throughput is defined as sales minus the variable costs to generate and support that sales. Now this becomes interesting, because of course as engineers we should be focusing on getting high output so that we can deliver a lot of solutions, so that relatively the operating expenses are in control. But productivity highly depends on whether the features that we build are actually also being sold well, whether customers adopt them, whether they generate revenue. And this is actually something that why I said to the person at the coffee shop, like when I was thinking like, yeah, you're probably also part of the problem, is that it's often the feeling of low productivity is not just about the output, it's often also related to companies that are not doing that well in revenue. then the productivity question starts to raise. So interesting thing is that what I've seen in a lot of SaaS companies is that the initial features that they launched with, they are basically their big selling product. And then they raise some venture capital, they start adding new features, but these features are often not that successful as the initial features. Result is, well, and while they are maybe commercially not as successful as the initial feature, they cost as much to build, they're not less complex. So what you see at companies in that stage is that, of course, revenue might be growing, but the cost of generating that revenue is growing faster because, the new features might not generate that much revenue, while the cost to build them is equal. And that's, I've worked that out in this model. It's a long tail of product features. What a lot of SaaS companies have, but I also think if you look at online portals of companies like banking or e-commerce, there's a few features that all customers use, or a few features that a lot of customers use, and there's a lot of features that a few customers use. And that's often in SaaS the case, but also if I go to, for example, the Rabobank website, everybody uses it to pay it, where there's like really loads of other features that hardly anyone is using. At least I don't really. But they did cost a lot of money to build. And that also contributes to that feeling of lower productivity. But it's not an output problem, that's a revenue problem compared to the output that was needed for that. So in summary, next time when I do a coffee chat with somebody like this, I just do that again, but I take my visuals with me and I take the person through this story because he was not the first one, and then I start with the bottom one because they think it's about output, but often it's about the outcome that's lacking. What really helps is to focus on the productivity as Goldratt defined it. If you make sure that your revenue compared to the cost made for that revenue is in line, then often people don't complain about productivity at all. However, on the other hand, the more output we generate instead in terms of productivity of engineers, the quicker we can do development cycles and learn and get to features that actually generate a lot of revenue. So we should still be focusing on output as engineers. However, we should also take ownership together with the product owners and stakeholders that the things we're actually doing are actually generating revenue, because that's in the end the true productivity. Productivity in terms of outcome and not in output. And if you do that well, you avoid the discussion about output. You're still responsible for making sure you increase it and that you stay close to the black line instead of getting on the orange line. But bottom line, it's about productivity according to Goldratt. So that's it. I made it on time. I was in between you and the lunch, so I thought it would be good to kind of speed it up. It's a really bad position to be in. I did share quite some resources on my personal page. So the references to books, articles, and other materials I've created myself or shared here are there, so you can download them and read them and dive a bit more into things like universal scalability law, how other companies do that. I wrote some summaries of books that I dropped there as well, like Accelerate, and I hope that helps you. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Arjen. So I like how a talk about, scaling and keeping speed is sped up by about 5 minutes. I appreciate that. So we do have a little bit of time before lunch. I know we're a little bit late, but I do want to see if there's any questions to ask Arjen. So I see one, and I'll ask it. As an engineer, how can I make this revenue problem clear to management?
So what I always ask stakeholders is that if we do a something like a sprint demo or whatever your practices are, but let's say you do like a periodic sprint demo, that's not just to show what you did as an engineer, that's also to invite the stakeholders to tell what they did with the features you delivered last time. So I think that demo works in both directions, and it often doesn't happen. So what I always ask is, when my teams present, I invite the stakeholders to share the achievements they made with the features delivered. And if you do that consistently, that also forces people to think in those terms before they actually put something on the backlog. Yeah.
All right. So I'll leave the other question to the hallway track, because
Sure.
lunch is standing right next door outside the main auditorium. So we'll go have lunch now. Please do find him if you have any other questions. Let's give him a round of applause. And then